Councillor Hoy, did you get to go to Word of Mouth now that they've reopened?
I did not, sadly.
I'm so excited it's open. I love that place. That French creme brulee, French toast, so good.
So good. Yeah, my husband and son were there. There was a long line, but they got in the first batch.
Was it open today? Was it first day?
Opened yesterday, I think.
Okay.
I think it has invite
Tuesday.
only. Yeah, invitation Tuesday, invite only. You didn't make the list, but they were there Wednesday.
I did make the list, but I didn't get to go.
Well, you could have sent a proxy. I could have gone for you. I would have done you proud.
What are we talking about?
Oh, we're talking about Word of Mouth restaurant reopened.
Nice.
It's been closed the whole time. So my husband and son go every Friday, or they did before the pandemic, and they would see Councillor Hoy there on Fridays. And I like the food, but I'm not motivated to be at a restaurant at 6:45 in the morning to get in line. 6:30 this time, I think.
I could eat my whole body weight in that creme brulee egg French toast with the crispy bacon.
Very good, yeah.
So good.
One of my friends just bought a house that's like a block away. So we're very excited that we don't have to wait in line. We can wait at their house.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Zachary.
Well, I did used to live across the street. And so when I first had Milo and he was a baby, I would stay in bed and I'd look out the window and say, there's no line. Go get us a table. Make sure. Text me if you have to wait that I'm not coming. My husband would go get a table and order my coffee and then say, okay, come across the street.
Oh, that's hilarious. You can get it to go, Lisa.
I know, yes. When you have a baby, you want people to wait on you. You don't want to do the dishes. Or
yeah.
Like clockwork, there's Shane's husband's clock.
Not my clock. Oh,
I know, I said your husband.
Oh yeah, or my husband. Yeah, you're right. It is pretty obnoxious, I've heard. Sorry about that.
I just feel like something's coming, like something about it.
Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun. I'm getting ready to set myself up for your texting polling. Take such concentration. Oh yeah.
Here, let's check. Push on the button, isn't it? Has anyone heard from him?
I saw him yesterday, but we didn't talk about this.
What? You talked about this all day?
We were both at the Minto Island Growers. They have a farm stand that's open later on Wednesdays. It's lovely out there. It's
We had
beautiful.
lunch today there. It was
It's so
good.
nice. So
That kale
nice.
salad is really good. I like your haircut, Commissioner Schweikart.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
the color I saw on Facebook.
cut
really.
it all off.
Yeah.
Dyed it red.
I'm
Woohoo.
kind of a short hair fan myself.
I got a haircut too.
Oh, nice.
looks
I love
lovely.
your haircut. So nice.
Thank
Trimmed
you.
up beard. I knew there was something, Councilor Hoy. I just couldn't quite put my finger on it.
Hey Eunice, what's the info for the texting thing again?
Yes, we're going to
I'll
drop
put
that in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah. We get started.
I also sent everyone an email, but you can just click the link in the chat or your email, whatever works.
Great. So welcome everyone to our 5th and final meeting of the zoning subcommittee for the Salem project. Thank you for hanging with us as we're working on this project. Just as a reminder, actually we should let everyone introduce themselves. I'm Eunice Kim, the long range planning manager for the city of Salem. Maybe staff first or councilors?
Hi. Oh, sorry. I just went. Hi, I'm Lisa Anderson. I'm going to be the planning administrator.
I'm Austin Ross, Long Range Planner.
And I'm Zachary Cardoso. I am an admin analyst with planning.
I'm Virginia Stapleton, counselor for Ward 1.
Jose Gonzalez, Councilor, Ward 5.
Chris Hoy,
And- oh,
Ward
sorry.
6, Council President.
Trevor
St. Griggs
Phillips,
Planning Commission. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor
Okay.
Phillips. I just saw your photo.
Trevor Phillips, Ward 3.
Chain Griggs Planning Commission, no ward.
Ashley Schweikart, Planning Commission.
Josh Pollock, Planning Commission.
And then I think we have members of the public here as well for public comment later on. Austin? Thanks.
Eunice, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh no. Oh no. Can you hear me? How about now? Is it that bad?
It's better.
Wait, maybe I'll can unplug my headphones. Is that better?
I can hear you pretty well, Eunice. I wonder if it's because you did not go to word of mouth, Chris, for your breakfast.
Oh no. Okay, let me know if you can't hear me. I'm just gonna talk. Okay, so I'm gonna give a brief overview of the project, make sure we're all on the same page. And today we're really focused on reviewing all 6 zoning options and taking a vote just as a recommendation. So a reminder, your vote is not for adoption. We are voting on your recommendation on these options that we will then incorporate into the zoning code and all the Our Salem work. And then you'll see it as we bring the whole Our Salem project through the adoption process, which we hope to start at the end of the year. Commissioner Griggs.
Clarification, before we vote on how we feel about each of the recommendations, will we have an opportunity to hear those who would like to speak to the particular recommendations?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think we'll do kind of similar to what we did last time. If people want to speak on a specific topic, I think that worked well, unless you all disagree.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And then we'll have public comment for those who have general comments. And then I guess next steps is that I just talked about. So just as a reminder, we're updating the comprehensive plan, includes goals, policies, and a map. There's a lot of other work going on this project. We're very much focused on the zoning code, but we are working on goals, policies, proposed comprehensive plan map, proposed zoning map. All that work is happening right now. This committee and this subcommittee is really focused on how we can make changes to the zoning code to help the city and the community really reach our greenhouse gas reduction goals. The council set a goal of reducing emissions to carbon neutral by 2050. And this is just one portion of the work that's happening. There's a whole climate action plan. There's other work going on with Our Salem, but in terms of the code itself, the committee is focused on making changes to hopefully help us reach those goals. So we have done work in terms of a map to try to help align where development, and particularly mixed use development, occurs and where our transportation system, particularly Cherriots, where our transit system is. And so you'll see that we've added a lot of mixed use along the core transit network. We've also added neighborhood hubs. So again, that work is ongoing, but we're very much focused on the details of the regulations in this committee. So the question really for this committee is, do we want to do more to actually promote, incentivize, encourage mixed use in housing near transit and near services? So this work really aligns with the work of the climate action plan that has draft strategies about doing just this, kind of focusing new growth, redevelopment, housing along our transit network. So Commissioner Pollock had mentioned this project. This is the Nordstrom Project that you maybe all saw in the newspaper recently. It's a redevelopment project downtown that is exciting, and it's a project that kind of shows that this type of work is already, or this type of development is already happening, mixed use development in walkable areas, in areas that are served by transit, where the market is shifting. And this project really would include both retail and housing units. And it does have some parking, though parking is not required in this area. There's some parking that they are proposing. So just an example of kind of a project that's already happening along the lines of what we're looking for. Go ahead. Councilman.
I wouldn't characterize this so much as a mixed use project. I think the coffee shop that they're anticipating in the lobby is just going to be a tiny coffee shop. And it's not really a traditional mixed use, as I understand it, based on my questions of the developer at our council meeting. So it's not not
Or
100%.
housing.
Yeah, it's really housing, which is great. That's not a criticism.
Yeah, I agree to that. And this is just another article from the Salem Reporter that around Cherriots and the exciting work that's happening there. They got some electric buses that they're going to add to Lancaster that route there and one of our busiest routes. And so again, all this work is kind of happening. All this kind of shift is happening. And so I think it aligns with a lot of the work that we're doing here in this community. So this is just a reminder of the 6 options that we're going to be talking about today. We're going to walk through each one, and we're going to ask for a vote through the polling on each one. And we're going to practice the polling because we didn't do it last time, just to make sure it all works again. So I think it's in the chat. Yep. That could put it in the chat. So if you want to either click on the link or use the text to EKIM301. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Text the number 22333, and what you write in the text is EKIM301. I think there should be 7 responses. Great.
I'm missing.
Oh.
I clicked the link, but I can't figure out how to answer a question. Oh, there it is. It worked that time.
I hadn't actually voted yet, so I'm wondering if others have participated.
Yeah, so I'm not sure for everyone who's watching or who's online, we're really just asking the subcommittee members, the 8 members, to vote. So there should only be 8 showing up on.
And I haven't voted yet, but I texted and I don't have this showing up on my phone. I texted EKIM301 to 22333, and it says I've joined the session, but it doesn't give me, it usually pops up on my screen.
I actually got a response back saying you can no longer respond to this activity. It allows up to 1 response per participant. I only did it once.
So it's possible that some of the answers were from a previous time when this polling question might have been used. So maybe those first few were not cleared out from last time.
So Austin, what do I do when I can't, when nothing's coming up on my phone?
I'm unsure. I will see if it keeps happening. Feel free to send me a text or a type a message to me in the chat, and I will be happy to record answers for you.
Okay, so I can just forward my answers to you or send my answer to you. Got
I've
it.
also found that just using the link, so not using your phone, is actually to me far easier.
Okay, I'm going to click on it. Browser's not supported. I'll just send you my answers, Austin.
Also, Commissioner Griggs, could you just try texting the letter A to that number?
Sure, hold on.
Because you've already used that number, you maybe don't have to join with Eunice's name. Maybe it's just open for you to vote.
I no longer can respond.
Oh, okay.
I'll just send it to Austin.
Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll come up for the next question, but if it doesn't, send me your answer.
Okay, there's my A.
Okay. Let's see how this goes. Austin, do you want to advance the screen? Okay, so the first option we all discussed was increasing the maximum height, particularly in the new mixed-use 3 zone. The idea, again, is to allow taller buildings, more housing near transit. And so we have a map that shows those zones, that zone. So the mixed-use 3 zone would be a new zone, as a reminder, that's basically replaces a lot of our commercial zones along the core network. So you see it along commercial, Lancaster, Wetland Road. And if you recall our earlier discussion, we talked about, what are the properties that are adjacent to that, and the majority were residential properties. And so when we talked about height, we also wanted to talk about setbacks. So based on our previous discussions, the subcommittee you were all leaning towards 70 feet as a maximum height in that new zone. but you wanted to make sure that the setback adjacent again to residential properties was based on the height. So as a building got taller, it had to be further away from the residential zone. The setback, this is what we do already in the mixed use 1 and mixed use 2 zones. That setback applies adjacent to residential, even if there's an alley. So it's different than other kind of setbacks that we have. And there would be buffer with a fence or a wall. So just at 70 feet, if we were to keep this as the setback, the building would be 92.5 feet away from the residential zones, with or without an alley. So this is just a picture that shows kind of that. Oh, go ahead.
So this probably came up and I just can't remember it because it was over a month ago. And does our fire department have the ability to service like buildings this tall? I'm sure we talked about it before. I just can't remember. Like, do ladder trucks, can they get that high?
Yeah.
Yes.
We did talk about other buildings, like the Coase building, I think is like 70, 73 feet. The Boise is like 65-ish feet. So South Bluff, I mean, so we do have. Go ahead.
And they're often built with sprinklers and then with water hoses inside fire rooms like that they can tap into on the inside of the building. So yes, not a problem.
Thank you.
This type, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just a question here. Was this the one that we were talking about putting a cap on how far back the setback went? Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So this is just an illustration. So you could have a shorter building closer to residential, also a taller building further away. So it's not saying you have to have a crazy building shaped like this. Next slide shows just, or you could just have a tall building far away with parking behind, etc. So there was a question of should we cap how the setback? So at some point, your tall building only needs to be a certain amount of feet away. And I think the question came up because we're trying to balance efficiently using our land with, a setback against residential. And so we're recommending a cap. If you were to set a cap at 50 feet, it would be our largest setback adjacent to residential. So this is just an example. Our industrial general zone, our IG zone, has a setback of 40 feet against residential right now. Buildings can be 70 feet tall in that IG zone. There's not a ton of locations where IG is adjacent to residential. There's some in the Portland Road kind of area, some in the Sunnyview area, but it's not as prevalent as the mixed use 3 would be adjacent to residential. But it would be the largest kind of setback we would have. That's a straight setback if we set it or capped it at 50. And then the next slide just shows a picture that we looked at earlier. It's the North Broadway area. This building is roughly 50 to 60 feet tall, and it's about 42 feet away from the property line, plus the alley, so it's close to 60 feet away from the properties on the other side. So if this building were to be 70 feet and 50 feet, if you can just imagine, like the building's a little taller and a little further away from the alley, just wanted to give a visual of potentially, what it would look like. So I guess that there's kind of two main questions. Do we still want to stick to the 70 feet? And then the second question is really, do we want a cap? And do you want that cap to be 50? We're kind of posing it as a yes or no, but you're welcome to say, I want 70 feet, I want a cap, but I don't want the cap to be 50 or et cetera. Because we haven't discussed that cap before. We just want to throw out kind of what we thought was reasonable from a staff point of view. So if you want to discuss it, or if you want to first hear from folks in the community, I know that was a question Commissioner Griggs brought up.
I'd like to hear from the community first.
Open it up? Okay. So is there anyone, I guess, from the community that would like to speak to the height in the mixed use 3 zone? No? Does anyone on the subcommittee, I guess, have additional questions or thoughts before we vote on this? Commissioner Pollack.
Okay, so there was a lot of testimony that was submitted, and that Salem 350, they actually supported the 70-foot height limit on all mixed-use zones, and they're actually pushing for the 40-foot setback from residential zones. They believe that would increase density compared to the 50-foot setback, which would but still allow for large shade trees. Now, I know the last time that we spoke, I mentioned there was, I think, Steve Anderson, who was not happy with the caps. But I think that the way if we've had already the general next to the residential, and we've had the 50-foot, I think that if we were to cap it at 50-foot, that wouldn't be controversial, and would still, I think, again, allow for some, the shade issue, where they're worried about having too much shade from the building and not having enough sunlight in the residential yard. So when you so what I'm trying to say is it looks like we have half the community going like, hey, if we want to really do something, go bold. And there was another one, if you want to go bold, then let's be more dense. So that would support the 40-foot. Because the thing that I think is the way we had it, where it was a minimum of 10 and then like 1.5 feet for every 1 foot of building. So that would be for a 70-foot building would be 92.5. That's like what that setback is larger than the building. So that doesn't seem quite right if we're trying to meet density. So I think at least the 50-foot, but if we want to go bold, it would be 40. So.
Are you talking about the setback, Commissioner Paul?
No.
Capping the setback.
Okay, got it.
Just a note for the record, Commissioner Levin joined the meeting at 3:19.
Thanks.
Yeah, does staff have any recommendations on capping the setback at 40 instead of 50?
We just thought, so 40 is, again, the largest that we have, again, but there's not very many areas, again, where there's industrial next to residential, where this would apply all along commercial, Lancaster. A lot of our areas are next to residential. So I guess it's kind of a conservative to go 50, just a little bit more. This doesn't say that you couldn't have, again, a shorter building that's closer. This just would say at 70 feet, you wouldn't have to be 90 feet back, you'd have to be at 50. But again, a shorter building could be closer to the property line. So it's different than a straight 40 feet, no buildings within that 40 feet. It's different than the IG zone, which is again kind of straight. So it's kind of a new idea, a little bit.
Would having this complicate things? I know it's always so much easier to have things kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm saying this weird, but yeah, does it complicate things in an unnecessary way?
I don't want to speak for the current planners, but I think they could do it.
Well, I think we have something similar for multifamily and some of our other zones where it's like the setback is 1 foot per 1 foot of height, but capped at 20. So like if your building's 30, you don't have to be 30 feet, you only have to be 20. So we already deal with that. It's math for planners, so we can handle it, I think.
Yes, of course you can. Thank you.
So I guess generally, does the committee like the idea of capping the setback versus having a really big setback for a tall building?
I do.
I'm comfortable with that 50 setback.
I like 50.
Yeah, I think that I was going to say if folks were going to go against the cap, I was then going to change what the setback calculation was to try to make it less feet for feet, because I do think that the way that the 1.5 feet for each foot of building height is a little, to me, excessive if there wasn't a cap. So
Maybe we can go ahead and vote on the height and then the cap, if the voting works. And Commissioner Levin, maybe we'll drop in the chat again the link, the full meeting. Can you do that, Zach? Commissioner Griggs, is it working for you this time? Oh, I can't hear you. Has everyone voted? Does anyone want to speak to the no vote? And you don't have to, I don't mean to call you out, just want to give an opportunity. Oh, just kidding. Okay.
Good job, Eunice. Way to suppress the vote. Call it out.
I just want to give an opportunity if there's, more discussion. Okay, it sounds like.
I will share. So this is Commissioner Levin. I'll just jump in. I was trying to figure out the wording of, so the question though, as it relates to what everyone was just discussing since I came in, whatever, Zachary, 19 minutes late, I had 14 minutes late, but splitting hairs there. The question of the capped at 50 feet, or I don't understand how that applies to the question that we're looking at now.
Sure. So this is asking what should the maximum height be in that mixed use 3 zone? And the setback would be based on the height. So again, the taller the building is, the further away it needs to be from a residentially zoned property. The next question is, at some point, do you want to cap it and say, a 70-foot building doesn't need to be 92.5 feet away. The 70-foot building could be 50 feet away, but
Got it. Okay.
Let's move on to the next question, Austin. So this is the cap question. So this is, again, the 70-foot building would be at 50. Someone unable to vote still?
Austin, you have mine right.
Okay, Austin's writing them down. Are you writing them down, Austin?
Yes, I have Commissioner Griggs' vote.
Thank you, Austin.
Great. So the next zoning option is eliminating parking requirements along the core network. So just as a reminder, the city has already eliminated parking requirements for multifamily housing along the core network within a quarter mile. That's not to say you can't provide parking, it's just saying the city does not require the parking. So this again allows for more development, more dense development, more mixed use and housing along transit. So where we landed the last time we spoke about this option was to eliminate parking requirements for mixed use developments within a quarter mile of the core. The idea was that we would incentivize both new mixed use development and redevelopment, but also infill. So we have a lot of commercial properties with big parking lots along the core network. And this would say you could add housing to your parking lot and it wouldn't hurt you because you no longer need to provide specific number of parking spaces for that existing development. That makes sense. So it supports the idea of infill along frequent transit routes. I did want to bring up that Cherriots wrote a letter. The Cherriots board is recommending that the distance be increased to half a mile instead of a quarter mile. I think they were talking about both multifamily housing and mixed use, if I remember correctly. But I thought it was relevant to this conversation. We had talked about an 1/8 of a mile or a quarter mile, and we landed at a 1/4 of a mile. And the Cherriots board is looking for a bigger distance. And just as a reminder, Cherriots, the core network is really where Cherriots is dedicated to providing service, increasing service, improving service in the future.
Were we going to ask for public comment at this point?
I was first of all, do you all have questions? Commissioner Pollack?
what would it take to change that 1/2 to 1/4 to 1/2?
You could just let us know. I guess we could have a discussion that we just posed the question as a quarter, but if everyone says no and it's because everyone wants a half.
Yeah.
we'll do
Well,
that.
because I think, I think at the time we were kind of being a little conservative because we really didn't have a lot of feedback from any testimony or any indication from anybody. And now with all this out there, there, like if we wanted to have the infill redeveloped for housing, it would make sense. A 1/2 mile would be better. And I understand the reason why they came up with the 1/2 mile, the Cherriots, was because of their frequency that they're indicating of service, especially with the new vehicles coming down that way. And I guess they also, besides the 6 million they got from the feds, they got the same amount from the state legislature. And so a lot of that's going for more buses along the core networks, as well as the state with some other stuff. But it looks like it could accommodate the 1/2 mile. So I just want to put that out there, that again, we're looking for the future. So first of all, I think a 1/2 mile is great, but if we go by a 1/4 mile because the city council recommended a 1/4 mile, does that mean that in the future we can change it to a 1/2?
Yeah, we can always do, a project to make updates to the code.
Yeah, it just takes so much time and effort for staff to get to this point. I was wondering if we have a 1/2 and if we vote for a 1/2 now, but yet only the developers only deal with the 1/4 of it, at least they have that option. So I would like it to be more options than less options. So, I want to recommend that we change it to a 1/2 mile before we actually vote on it. So can I hear from the others?
Commissioner Grace, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I do. I don't really have an issue with the 1/2 mile because it is optional. A developer could still provide parking, and I like that part of the flexibility. Realistically, I question how many people are going to walk a 1/2 mile to the bus. I mean, that's a very aspirational goal, but I don't think many people are going to be walking a 1/2 mile to a bus stop. But I could live with it only because it is optional, and a developer could choose to provide that parking if the market demand was there. Those are my thoughts.
Councilor Hoy?
Thanks, Eunice. So when we decided on this for multifamily, some of the feedback that we got was because of the nature of the core network and the way that the transit system currently operates, which is every bus goes downtown, essentially every bus. There are a couple that don't, but so they all converge downtown. And so any neighborhood that is near downtown is subjected to being closer to the core network. And so if we go to a 1/2 mile, you're essentially saying our entire core is going to be within these parking requirements because there's so many bus lines that go in that radius that pretty much the entire core of Salem will be subject to that rule. And that is it's a big impact on parking for existing single family residents in those neighborhoods, Grant, Highland, all of those, some of my neighborhoods, and certainly in Ward 2 as well. And so that was a huge consideration, and a lot of the feedback that we got is that if we increased it to a 1/2, it would essentially, it would really impact a lot of existing neighborhoods. And so that's why we went the way we did, so.
Any other comments from the committee? Oh, Commissioner Schweikart.
Yeah, I appreciate Councilmember Hoy's comments, and I was trying to think through that idea because I had heard that from neighbors in those kind of central communities, and I guess like the thought that I had was whether or not we would see a lot of, or we would see a volume of development that would occur without parking, any parking provided to an extent that it would make a huge difference. Because I guess when Shane was saying that that everyone still has the option to provide the parking, my brain thinks that okay, I don't see a lot of private developers totally eliminating their parking, even if we do provide this incentive. And so I don't, I wonder how much of a change, or how rapid of a change, or the volume change we would actually see in redevelopment or new development. And it would have to be redevelopment, because those areas of town it would all have to be infill. So that, I'm wondering what actual quantity we would see of redevelopment work with zero parking. I don't know if that would actually happen, or it would take quite a long time for that to happen. And so I wonder how much the concern is taking this idea and spreading it, and thinking about it, oh my God, what if every single unit, or what if every single parcel had that now, versus what would be actually the rate of change if everything was to redevelop. So that's all my thought was.
Eunice, we can't hear you.
Oh, go ahead. You have your hand up? Thanks, Austin.
Did you call on somebody?
I called on you, Phil.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the name. We talked a bit about this with Bob Courtwright, who's an expert like you are, Eunice, and the other staff on this. And I think the caution we would give you is, in terms of the climate action plan, you want to fall on your sword on the really big items. And beyond a quarter mile, the studies have shown that people don't walk to buses, and they just, the curve drops off really rapidly around a quarter mile. And I don't think there's a lot of land zoned much more than a quarter mile away that is multi-use or multifamily residential. I mean, if you look at the map, it doesn't look like those zones go much more than a quarter mile from your main boulevards, Market and Commercial and so on. Oh, excuse me. And so I would caution about falling on your sword on this, because I think Councilmember Hoy points out that because of the proximity of Center, Market, State as core networks, you really do bring in almost all the near in East Side neighborhoods into this idea. And I don't know that you really have zoned a lot of land for mixed use in the area. So in terms of the bang for your buck, I think that you might cause yourself more heartache for the half mile than you really get in terms of more buildings being built or even people using the transit system. But we would like to propose that you think about eliminating parking requirements because of the coming advent of self-driving cars. And these buildings and are going to be built with these parking spaces for 20, 30, 50 years. But within 10 years, likely, you'll have self-driving cars, and people really won't need to own cars. They're the most underutilized capital asset in our society. They just sit idle in the parking lot somewhere all the time, mostly. And people will find that it'll be much cheaper to have a self-driving car take them most places they need to go, and then rent a car for vacations. So that's a different issue, and we want to study in the climate action plan to see if eliminating parking would really tighten up the city much. But there's things like, if you think about a driveway, if you eliminate the driveway, then you get a free parking space on the street. So it's almost like a double driveway equals a parking space. It's like you're really not eliminating the parking, you're just making it on the street instead of in the property. So I think for this one, we would support a quarter mile, But we'd like the larger question addressed in the climate action plan of, is parking really necessary in the future? Because these are long range requirements. When you build a building, it's going to be there a long time. And so was it whatever parking you required. And it's hard to tear up concrete and get anything to grow. So that's a separate issue than this. But for here, 350 Salem would be happy with the quarter mile for now.
So, so does the subcommittee, do you want to vote on the quarter mile? And if everyone says no, then vote on the half mile? Yeah. Okay, so let's do that. So this is the quarter mile, eliminating parking requirements in the mixed use zones.
This is just for the mixed uses though, correct?
That there are more people who want the half mile. I don't have a question on the half mile vote. Go ahead.
Is there like a question on, mixed use and multifamily, or?
Oh, multifamily we've already done in the code. There's
Okay.
already no parking, yeah.
So this is just for mixed use at this time?
So this would be if you have commercial, you add housing, the housing already doesn't require parking. So then this would just be saying that your commercial use also would not need parking if you've added housing.
Though I have a feeling the no votes mean maybe they want half a mile.
How many no votes are there?
I don't know, I can't tell. One or two?
Yeah, I think that the way that it's written, it doesn't. I want at least a quarter mile. I'd love more than that, which is why I said no, because I love more than a quarter mile.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, Eunice. I think the questions are being commingled. We had prepared to get final confirmation on eliminating the parking for the mixed use within the 4th mile, because last time we had ended up with staying at the quarter mile. So maybe just verbally we can ask, do you want to eliminate parking for commercial services when you're adding multifamily? Then we can ask about the distance, even though our poll's not set up that way. Eunice, verbally, can we do that?
Sure.
Would that mean like the quarter mile, like eliminating requirements for quarter mile for basically everything?
Well, we had already generally decided not to eliminate, the committee, you all had decided not to eliminate parking for all uses within a 1/4 of a mile. You had decided that you like the idea of just eliminating it because it already doesn't count for multifamily, it's already eliminated. So just eliminating it for commercial uses when you're adding multifamily. So a true mixed use, with the idea being that that's a way to incentivize the new housing in that area. Those areas already have commercial uses, so we don't necessarily need to incentivize more commercial in those areas.
So that's a verbal question then aside from this poll question. Correct.
Right, so maybe we can, maybe in this question, just don't think about the distance, but do you all agree still with your previous thought that you want to eliminate the commercial parking if it's part of a mixed use development?
Parking requirements, yes.
Requirements, yes, exactly. Yes, thumbs up, that's a very good way to do it. Thank you. Mr. Swiker did a hand.
I realize that there's the reactions icon that I've seen in other Zooms is not here. So, but my answer is yes.
Yes. Okay. And I see Pollock and I see Stapleton. Yes. Councillor Hoy. Yes. Okay. Phillips and I don't see Levin, Commissioner Levin or Councillor Gonzalez.
Saw someone's thumbs
Oh,
up.
hands up from Councilor Gonzalez. Thank you. And then Commissioner Levin. Agreement from you?
Yeah, I'm just gonna give verbal agreement. I'm doing this mobily and I can't do the whole hand gesture thing right now. I got 13 things going at once.
That's okay. Thank you. Okay, so that confirms what you all said last time. So really now we're down to, do we want to change the distance for any of these parking reductions, mixed use, multifamily, et cetera? So I guess, how do we want to ask it? Do you want to change it to half a mile?
Half mile.
Yeah, so that's the question, which is not on the screen. So again, we'll just do verbal or thumbs up. Do you want to change it to half a mile?
Mine's a thumbs down. In case
Thumbs down.
No.
Thumbs down. Thumbs
Yeah,
down.
thumbs down.
Wait.
Hey, Griggs, Hoy, Stapleton, we're thumbs down. I see.
Thumbs down.
Thumbs
Okay.
down.
So we're talking about, sorry, we're talking about expanding to a half mile for the MU zones, for the multifamily zones. Which one are we talking about?
I think we're talking about for both. The request from Cherriots was that we consider it for both.
Yeah.
For multifamily and for mixed use developments.
I just want to say that since listening to to Councillor Hoy and also to the
Phil.
Mr.
Carver, and the facts about the study and how the curve just goes off, and that also was a concern for Commissioner Griggs. I'm gonna withdraw my half a mile to a quarter mile. I think it makes more sense. So
Did I read this wrong? Sorry, I'm re-looking at the two recommendations on the Cherriots letter, and it says remove parking minimums entirely for the HB 2001 housing types, which are the kind of duplex, triplex, fourplex
Middle
types,
housing.
right? And then the second one is extending the multifamily parking minimum waiver.
Right.
So it doesn't refer to mixed use zones.
Right. So the middle housing is a separate project that's going to have a public hearing before Planning Commission and then come to council. So we weren't necessarily asking the committee about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the Cherriots folks knew that this mixed use, reducing the parking for the mixed use in alignment with the multifamily was part of the committee's work. And I think their letter's actually just addressed to the Planning Commission for your work session next week, maybe, or just because you're working on House Bill 2001. But we thought we would share it with the zoning subcommittee because you all are looking at the parking within a quarter mile for the mixed use.
Got it.
Mimicking what the multifamily parking reductions already are.
So I guess I would say that I support the two recommendations that are made by the Cherriots board with respect to the UDC update, but because that doesn't reference the mixed use zone, I don't think it's appropriate to, like you said, like conflate what's going on in this discussion. So I will hold my powder until our planning commission meeting.
Your last planning commission meeting.
The last one.
So does anybody else want to speak to the half mile in support of the half mile?
Councilor Stapleton has her hand raised.
Oh, great. Sorry.
Yeah, I would just say that I really appreciated what Mr. Carver said about choosing the thing that we're going to fight for. And if the studies don't show that we're going to get a lot of bang for our buck here, then we should save our fight for another one, in my opinion. And I think that if time goes on and Chris and Trevor and I and Jose are still on council and we have all of these buses that are going everywhere at once and we have all of this opportunity to move that from a quarter mile to a half mile, then we'll do that, right? And I understand that you want to do everything right now, but I think that with the study showing that it drops off at a quarter mile, and knowing that we're gonna need to have something to help get people over a lot of hurdles on some other issues, I think we should save that for, it's just kind of like we're, oh Lord, what am I trying to say? Like, we're saving up, right? A goodwill box here, that I think that we should keep it at a quarter mile and run with that for now.
Like Commissioner Schweikart said, you're going to keep your powder dry for another fight.
So I think we landed on this one. Sorry for all the confusion with conflating things with Cherriots. I thought it was relevant to the discussion. But at least we had a good discussion.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to the next one if that's okay. So the next one is about increasing the minimum density in the mixed use and multifamily zones. Where we landed last time, we talked about this. Let's see if we can advance the script thing. So we're looking citywide is where we kind of landed last time. The minimum density right now is 12 units per acre. We, the subcommittee, you all landed at 15 units per acre. We had done some research in terms of what densities we're building at. We're actually building closer to 2021 units. We think 15 units per acre is what's going to come out from the state as a requirement near transit in any case. And we did talk to developers and they didn't think 15 units per acre would be a barrier to development. So we just want to get confirmation that 15 units per acre in the mixed use zones and the multifamily 2 zone throughout the city. So this is not tied to the core network. That's what we talked about last time, that you're still on board with that. So it's just a straight up yes or no. Feel free to ask questions. Councilor Phillips, go ahead.
So the 15 is or it will be the state minimum?
It's likely going to be a requirement through the climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking that is happening right now.
And what's the time frame for that rulemaking, roughly?
They don't think the adoption of the rules will be until next spring in March, but they're in discussions of the rules right now.
And our adoption of this rule would happen in what time frame? Roughly.
Hopefully by next spring, summer.
Oh, a year from now.
Well, it depends on how long the adoption process takes. We're starting it at the end of this year or early January, but we expect many public hearings.
Yeah, but roughly the same time as the rulemaking from the state. So the state minimum really feels like a true minimum.
Yes, if the state adopts it, though, it won't be like immediate. They will give us time.
Okay.
So for example, if we don't adopt it and then in March, that's what they end up adopting, we would probably have, a year or year and a half or some amount of time to implement it.
I was watching the last session that I missed due to my ER work schedule. And did this come up? Was there some opposition to this requirement? Okay. Those are my questions.
Members, or I guess members of the public as well? Or do we want to vote?
Nobody wants to talk from the public? I guess not.
Okay, let's vote, Austin.
I think that's everybody.
Okay, great. 15 it is, as a recommendation. Again, it does need to go through the adoption process. Okay. So the next idea we talked about at our last committee meeting about requiring multifamily housing in the mixed use zones. Where we landed as a subcommittee was maybe not requiring, but just leaning again on incentives. And we talked a lot about the type of redevelopment and info we're seeing along the core network right now. We gave some examples of, I think it was like a dentist office or in any case. So you all wanted to lean more heavily on the incentives route. Staff across the city is already looking at financial incentives like the construction excise tax and other affordable housing incentives as part of kind of broader work that's happening. There was a work session a month ago maybe, and so that will come back to council, these incentives. So that work is happening, but we just wanted to make sure that everyone still wanted to go the incentive route and not require housing in the mixed use zones. It looks like, oh yes. And so there's an example Commissioner Pollack wanted to give. And go ahead.
Okay.
Austin,
So-
can you click on that example? There's a link there.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, yeah. So what you're seeing here on the bottom picture is Bellaterra and Huntington Beach. And what they did was they created, there was and I think I told you about this before, there used to be a mall there. And other than one side of the mall where it had Burlington Coat, pretty much the mall was dead. Everybody, the tenants moved out. It was really bad. Other than Burlington Coats and a separate building, Staples, like to the far right here, you see a little in the corner, there's a macaroni grill. And then right there where the arrow is, that's where Staples is. And then over towards the very end, that's where Barnes and Noble. And then across there was a Burlington Coat. So what happened is they went ahead and they built this sort of Bridgeport, like a Bridgeport Village in Tigard. That's what Bellaterra is. It has a little amphitheater there, outdoor thing where they have like concerts. The big building to the left is a movie theater. They have all kinds of services, pizza, coffee. In the back, a bunch of little restaurants. The big thing in the square is a covered parking lot. And so they had this first, and they got a lot of foot traffic in there. So then what they did is to the left side is they started building what they call the residences at Bellaterra. So if you now get rid of the Google Earth and go to the bottom frame. And the reason why I point this out is that it's kind of hard to us to make decisions in a vacuum. But look what we had here is the one in 1994, you see it, there's all this big mall there. And again, like I say, a lot of it was empty, a lot of parking. As to the Bellaterra 2020. And again, if you require every building, all these the main street right there, I'm not sure if it's Edinger or Golden West, I can't remember, or Warner, that those little tiny things, like one of them is, like I said, that was Macaroni Grill. Over here is California Pizza Kitchen, Corner Bakery, Kingfish House, which is my great restaurant, and then the entrance towards the thing. So if we require that every one of these little ones have residential, you won't have this incentive to like, okay, here's the services along the main drag that brings people in and traffic towards this other thing. And then, but yet, because of that traffic, it would allow these people to go ahead and build the residences, which again was what we wanted, a mixed use area there. And then of course, or if you were to widen Google Earth, you'd see to the north there's an academy there, there's ball fields there, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. So and of course, that's the 405 freeway, which is basically access to everywhere throughout Orange County that you need to get, including the airport. So I think it was a good idea not requiring that every little thing they build require residential housing, giving the option. Like I say, they built all these little things first and brought the traffic in, and then that made sense to build multi-housing. And then of course, if you go to the left side of the slide for the 2020, you don't see that there, but all that over there is also multi-housing. It's not part of the Bellaterra development, but what it did is it incentivized it more multi-housing. And again, I know that they have like nail salons there, dry cleaners, hairdressers, all the supportive services that you would need if you want to live and work and have supportive service there. So I just wanted to make sure that you had like some examples, because it's kind of hard making decisions in a vacuum because you're really not sure how is it going to be. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollack. Commissioner Griggs, you need hand raised?
Yeah, I have my hand raised. I think we really beat this topic up on that last discussion. And I think the most compelling example that y'all gave was on Lancaster with the build or rebuild of McDonald's. I mean, that would have, or any of those that would be developed on those main corridors to require multifamily housing in an area that might not be the best place for anybody to live. And also it's not very cost effective. I mean, I think you would just have less and less development if you had that requirement. So I'm very much in favor of the incentives on this one, on this particular issue.
Austin, do you want to move to the vote? Oh, and then Phil has his hand raised. Go ahead, Phil.
Thank you. One thing I'd like to add is in our comments, we talked about system development charges. We'd like a really robust discussion as part of the climate action plan of really differentiating system development charges. The cost that's imposed by these infill developments on the infrastructure is really pretty minimal. But the cost of development on the fringes is huge because it requires all the traffic and water and sewer lines to be extended, and the congestion is made worse instead of better. So one of the things, it's not prohibited in this proposal, but we'd really like differential system development charges to be really strongly addressed. And that's not for this vote. It's just indication of the discussion in the upcoming climate action plan. Thank you.
I mean, I think that's a good reminder. There's a lot of other work going on related to climate action and GHG, and we will continue to work with the climate action plan and those strategies. Commissioner Schmeicher.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to ask a question of the other subcommittee members as to whether or not we wanted to be more specific as the type of incentives that we would prefer. You know, it's pretty general, say incentivize. And, you know, I think that there were a couple of options that were stated in the memo that was provided for today. You know, and I think that we did, I don't know, we talked about a lot of them last time. I don't know if we got a sense of which ones this subcommittee was most in favor of versus least in favor of. So there were things like, you know, allowances for increased density or increased height or reduced parking. And then there's the financial incentives, which I think rightly should be tied to below market rate housing. So, you know, I think that those are some of the nuances that we didn't really get into. And so it feels really broad and vague just to say incentivize to me without knowing which of those incentives we're most in favor of, or I guess if you're in favor of all of them, then that's good. But I just wanted to hear from my fellow subcommittee members.
So I'm not on the committee, but I'll jump in. I think that a lot of the incentives of reduced parking, higher heights and densities, we are tackling already kind of as part of the subcommittee work. I think some of the financial incentives is, I thought where kind of the committee was saying, like, we support the city doing more on financial incentives and others kind of outside of the code work that we're doing. So I think we are tackling a lot of incentives in terms of the code right now. But correct me if I'm wrong, my numbers know.
I think you're right, Eunice, because I remember the financial incentive discussion, which we didn't have a lot of detail on that because I know that you're trying to dig through that right now, but I think that was the direction of the committee.
In the interest of time, go ahead, Councillor Phillips.
So this is probably the topic then that got a little bit of pushback last session that I missed because of my ER schedule.
Yes, this is where we talked about you know, requiring housing and what the implications could be on other types of development and infill that's happening along our core network, and trying to lean more heavily again on incentives than a strict requirement that people develop housing along the book.
Eunice, can you summarize for Councillor Phillips just a couple of the examples that you gave that were pretty? Do you remember those? I do remember the one on.
There was the Starbucks. It was an infill down at this. I think it was a Sunny Slope area.
Mm-hmm.
There was I think it was a dental or some sort of eye care development. There's, oh, Austin's popping up. There's
I
one
can-
on Lancaster, where there's some commercial uses that are going in on Lancaster.
We
And
also
so
had
to-
on South Liberty, there was a Subway at the Ross that was infill, just
was
a
a good
small little building that would have required it. We talked, I think, about an example over near Edgewater, where they were doing a physical therapy building that, you know, could have potentially required housing as well. So some examples.
It was pretty pervasive, Councilor Phillips, to have for that example, I remember the one on the subway out on Liberty, to have that little subway shop, then have to provide some housing in addition to the subway sandwich place. So it was just, it was too, I think for, at least from my perspective, it was too much of a broad brush stroke for me, but.
Also at the Willamette Town Center, where they're currently eliminating a lot of parking spaces and adding new businesses, it would be required there as well, and doesn't seem to make it. And they're putting in like a Panera and those sorts of things, and eliminating their big parking lot out front. So I think that's a prime example as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to get my thoughts out there at the risk of hurting myself politically, I'm not opposed to mandates, but I got the sense that, as perhaps Commissioner Griggs said, it's a bit of a broad brush to do it here. So I think I'm in favor of the question as submitted.
Eunice, how do the incentives normally work? Like staff, I'm assuming, comes up with that and it just gets put in, or is there any kind of input or feedback from different community groups or groups like this or the council?
Yeah, anytime there's a kind of a policy decision on something like that, there's input from the community and ultimately goes to council.
Great, thank you.
That's why we get the big bucks. Oh, wait, no.
Okay, let's vote. There's a few more. Great. I think that's everyone, right, Austin? Okay, moving on. So we talked a lot last week about large subdivisions requiring middle housing and neighborhood hubs, and we are going to break it up into two again. So the first one is, okay, so Councilor Phillips, just to catch you up, we had initially talked about requiring middle housing in large subdivisions, and we had worked then, there was a suggestion from the home builders that perhaps it makes more sense to have a minimum density instead that would create some flexibility. So instead of saying you need to have like 50% of your lots have triplexes on them, instead saying you need to meet this minimum density, but you can do it by doing a duplex, doing smaller lots, adding a triplex, maybe doing the ADU. So it's would achieve kind of the goal of this while creating flexibility. And so we landed at requiring or establishing a minimum density of 5.5 units per acre on subdivisions that were at least 5 acres. So it's kind of very, very nuanced. And then there's a question on whether we should actually tier the densities based on the size. So the first question again is, okay, I'll move on. So that was where we landed, 5.5 units per acre on subdivisions that are at least 5 acres. So if you had a small subdivision that's 2 acres, you don't need to meet a minimum density, or 3 acres, you don't need to meet a minimum density. And we had gone through and looked at kind of the minimum densities that were being built and walked through some examples. And so what we did since that meeting is we did look at subdivisions all the way back kind of to 2000 to see, and the vast majority of those are small subdivisions. And the vast majority that are less than 5 acres could meet a minimum density of 3 units. So if we wanted to set one just to make sure we had one, we think 3 units makes sense. And then the question was, well, what about larger subdivisions? If you were more than 20 acres, should we establish a little bit higher of a minimum density, because those larger subdivisions have even more flexibility to have lot sizes, different types of housing. So again, we went back and looked at subdivisions that have included duplexes, townhouses, and we landed on recommending 6 units per acre, which is not a lot more than 5.5 units per acre. And we also wanted to look at, so if we have a very large subdivision, which we don't get very many of, I think when we looked at our subdivisions that were approved in 2019 and 2020, there was like 2 or 3 that were that large. The vast majority are less than 20 acres. But there was discussion kind of from the builders who came and talked about a lot of our land that is remaining is on slopes. They're challenging areas to develop. So what would this type of requirement, what would it do? What would it mean? And so we looked at kind of, if you were to say, you have say like 30 acres, but say 40% of that land is really not developable because it's streets, it's wetlands, it's slopes, or there's some other reason, there's some constraint on that land. If you established a minimum density of 6 units per acre, your average lot size would be about 4,300 square feet. So we thought that was reasonable because you could have larger lots and just do a duplex or an ADU or a triplex. But I wanted to walk through some examples just because it is kind of a new idea. Okay, so we looked at a couple subdivisions that again included duplexes or townhouses, because generally you can't do triplexes, fourplexes in a single family zone yet. We will be able to in the future when House Bill 2001 is implemented, which we're working on as part of the Setback project. This is an older subdivision that was approved back in 2004. It's larger than 20 acres. It's 26 acres. It has a lot of single family lots, but a couple duplexes, and those are the red dots. Those are the duplex lots. That subdivision had a density of 5.88 units per acre. So if we were to say, actually, you need to do 6 units per acre, they would have had to add 3 units. Do you want to show the next 2 slides? This is just an aerial, it's built now.
Eunice, what's the lot size of those?
The average lot size there is 5,571 square feet, but they range, I'm sorry, I wrote it really small, but about 5,500 square feet was the average lot size. And then the next is just a picture that shows, duplexes blended with the single family home. The next example is a more recent approval. This is, and it's important to look at kind of more recent subdivisions because we do have new stormwater requirements since back in the day. And so this is a larger subdivision that has 177 single family lots. And I circled kind of the red area is the townhouse lots. The blue dots are the stormwater lots. So those are not housing lots. Those are reserved for stormwater. They achieved density of 5.4 units per acre. If the requirement was 6, they would have to add 18 units. In that subdivision. Their average lot size was 5,500 square feet. And then the last example isn't 20 acres, but I wanted to show it just because we have talked about this one before. This is in South Salem. It's almost 20 acres. It's 88 lots. The blue dots again are stormwater, so that no one's living on those blue dot lots. It's 88 lots, 4.4 units per acre. So if we were to say this was 21 acres, not 20 acres, and the requirement was 6 units per acre, they would have to add 31 units to meet the minimum density, again, of 6 units per acre. The lot sizes here range from 6,000 to 13,000. So, or they could do, I guess, smaller lots and more units that way, as opposed to adding a duplex, triplex. So I wanted to kind of give that range of subdivisions. I know we settled on kind of 5.5 units per acre. And I don't know if the subcommittee wants to kind of stay there or is interested in kind of a tiering approach where kind of the larger ones have a higher density and the smaller ones have a lower density, or if we just want to say 5 units or 5.5 and all other small subdivisions would be exempt. There's a couple hands raised. Commissioner Rice, Cherriots, go ahead.
Unmuted. So I'm kind of confused because I thought we had good consensus and also with the home builder groups on that 5.5.
Yes.
So I really do want to hear from anybody who wants to address that question because I am not an expert in this field at all. And I look at that map and you say you have to just add 13 units. That doesn't seem like necessarily a lot to me, especially if you can do middle housing approaches in some of those lots. But I think it's very significant. So I'm concerned that we moved away from a point that we had consensus on with the public and with the home builders to a point where I think it might not be a common agreement.
Commissioner, you're correct. We landed on 5.5 and we'd worked with the home builders. The only reason we're bringing back this tiered approach is because that was a question that was raised at the subcommittee. Could we tier it and have a different approach? And so we wanted to bring back an example. The committee wants to stay at 5.5. That's fine. I know some of the builders are here. I'm going to let Phil go first. He's had his hand raised for a while, and then Mike will go to you if that's okay. Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, this is one that I am willing to fall on my sword on, and I think the council should also, because this is really going to define the character of Salem, and it's going to make whether Salem is going to be easily served as a community by mass transit as opposed to not. And this is very incremental, a tiny change from standard practice. And yet the idea was to really increase the amount of middle housing, townhouses, cottage clusters, et cetera, which are very amenable. People really like those. There's quite a few of those have gone in recently, and a lot of townhouses have been built and people can do those. So it's a mix of single family with large lots and townhouses and cottage clusters, we think can easily get to 7 or even 8 dwellings per acre. And as another thought, it might be better to define it on some other number based on net possibilities, you know, after streets and slopes and rivers and set-asides and stuff, creeks. That might be a better way to define it as net acres, net buildable acres rather than gross acres. But anyway, we think that this is really the key thing other than the quarter mile from transit that's going to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions over the next 20 to 30 years. And there's a lot of development going to happen in the next 20 to 30 years. So we don't have an exact number that we're going to fall on our sword on, but 5.5 is not going to do it. And we'd also like a discussion at some point of why 5 acres, why a 2-acre development couldn't have a 6 or 5 dwellings per acre or some other number for net acres. Anyway, this is our big pushback on this process. Otherwise, you guys have done a great job, considered a lot of things, really been looking to increase density. And I appreciate all the council and committee members, the planning commission members and staff really looking to try to increase density and make it more easily served by transit. So, but this is one exception that we're going to carry on through the whole process till next year. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil. Mike, did you want to go ahead?
There we go. Thanks, Eunice. Appreciate it. Yeah, and as Eunice mentioned, of course, we suggested using the minimum densities instead of the certain number of middle housing units. And I think we could live with that 5.5. I mean, it's a pretty significant change from many past development patterns, but we think it's manageable. But I think that 6 unit per acre minimum when we're over 20 acres, frankly, it goes too far. It's pretty drastic and it can be pretty radical. And despite what was said, it's really not a tiny change. And, when you use Eunice's example there of that 20-acre parcel that was proposed for 88 lots, that requires 31 more dwelling units. And of course, to get that, then you're going to have to split 31 of the existing lots. And so that's going to leave a development in which you've got a majority of middle housing compared to the single family that had been proposed for it. And our concern is it really makes it very difficult for the development community to provide for the type of housing demand that we're seeing out there in the market right now. That greater density middle housing, it requires, building in a more vertical fashion. And so you're going to get those living spaces upstairs, your primary bedrooms and the like. And that's really not what consumers want right now. There's a great demand to try and get those living spaces on the main floor. Very difficult to do with those smaller units. And so it really creates a tremendous risk for developers. And I think it's really increasingly likely to drive housing consumers into the bedroom communities. And that's what we've been seeing the last number of years, is a vast majority of the development is shifting outside of Salem because that's where housing consumers can afford what they're after, and they can find what they're after. I think it's going to actually make the problem worse. You're going to get folks commuting in, driving, and it's really making the problem worse, the very problem that we're trying to solve. We were a proponent of House Bill 2001, and we want to see more of that middle housing created. But I think if we ignore the realities of market demand and force potentially more supply than what the market's able to absorb, it could really upend the market. So really, we would ask that you leave that at the 5.5 acres and not 5.5 units per acre, regardless of size, and not go above that for those larger projects. And I do want to point out, I know it's not the purview of this committee, but it's really, really important to note that next Tuesday at the Planning Commission, there's going to be a work session on changes to the tree ordinance that are going to mandate that a developer keep at least 50% of the trees as a part of the development process. And I'm just going to tell you, it is in direct conflict with what you're trying to achieve here. You simply can't preserve 50% of the trees while achieving these kind of densities. So really, you've got conflicting goals. And for those of you that are city councilors and planning commission members, you're going to have to reconcile those conflicting priorities. Because otherwise, I think you're going to see a significant amount of our residential construction and development come to a screeching halt. You just simply can't have that kind of density and that kind of tree preservation in Salem, simply because the types of land that we have, it's sloped. It requires major regrading to get the streets to meet the fire code, to get the intersections flat for disability standards, to create flat building lots. There's tremendous challenges with trying to reconcile both of those with the tree preservation and the density. So I'll leave it at that. And I think there's a couple others that want to weigh in here as well.
I actually have a question for Mike before he goes away.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for your testimony. Can you address, Mr. Carver mentioned a couple of other things in that I didn't hear you address, and I apologize if you did and I just missed it. But he also talked about that exemption for less than 5 acres, maybe moving it down to 2 acres. Can you talk about what your opinion is on that and how that might impact you? And also, what was the other thing? Darn it.
Net.
What was it?
The net instead of
Thank
gross.
you. Thank you. Exactly. That's exactly it, Josh. Thank you. Can you address the net, if we had a net minimum rather than the gross minimum, if that would impact you?
Yeah, so on the first issue, and this might be something that somebody like Mark Grenz can speak to here in a moment, but certainly on those smaller parcels, you've got unusually shaped parcels in many cases, and so it's a lot more difficult, perhaps, just given parcel shape and parcel size, to achieve those greater densities because it is unique shapes. And on the net, certainly, I mean, we're open to looking at a net equation, looking at what that number should be. It's certainly something that could be looked at.
It seems like, and again, this is outside of my area of knowledge, but it seems like a net version of a minimum would be to your advantage, because you're eliminating all of those things that wouldn't allow you to build on that particular area anyway. So am I misunderstanding that? Please help me.
Well, I mean, potentially. I mean, of course, it all depends on what the number is, when
sure,
measured
of course.
Gross. So I would assume that if you're measuring net, there's going to be a desire to change that from 5.5 to something else. So it just comes down to what that number would be.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
John, go ahead.
So I appreciate you guys having me on today, and I want to say that we're excited about middle housing. So that last subdivision that Eunice showed is actually our subdivision that's currently under construction. The 89, it's actually 89 lots. It was originally 88, so it changed at one point. So not a big deal. But the concern with that is when I look at the other two subdivisions that Eunice showed, those are primarily flat. However, ours has some serious topography to it. And I'd welcome any of you to come out and take a look at it, because we have a lot of topographical challenges and serious slopes that, while you can see on the site plan, I have 6,000 square foot lots, 7,000 square foot lots, 9,000 square foot lots. When you actually look at the building pad that's left after the amount of slope that I have to deal with, it's significantly smaller. So trying to add a lot more density to that by creating smaller lots just isn't feasible unless I'm building a ton of huge walls, and then it's going to become financially infeasible. So I would really, our biggest concern is the unintended consequences of requiring a minimum density. We have another subdivision that's probably going to be one of the larger ones left in Salem that we just finished annexing into the city. That's almost 40 acres, and we're looking at using a mix of middle housing in there. But our concern by mandating these things is that's potentially going to push development away, because if all of these lots have topography challenges or riparian zones or other things, you're no longer providing what the market wants, which is single family subdivisions. And I know it's been talked about in here as well that the market is leaning towards mixed use housing and middle housing. We have townhome development springing up, which is why we're looking into it. But I would rather have the market decide, because the market's going to figure it out. But by forcing the market to create minimum densities, I'm afraid that you're going to scare more development away, because it's going to make it either prohibitive or it's going to make it to where you're not going to be giving the market what it wants. So you're going to develop these lots, and then these lots are going to sit undeveloped. I know earlier in one of the other topics, we were talking about incentivizing rather than mandating. And I think this could be another place where if middle housing is the way to go, then incentivizing it. But, a lot of people still want that nice single family home that's a $500,000 home. They're not going to want a townhome or a duplex right next to them, because a lot of people who own those duplexes and townhomes are investors, and so they turn into renters. And renters generally, not always, but generally take care of their property. They don't take care of it as well as a homeowner will. And so somebody isn't going to want to move in to a brand new house next to a bunch of a brand new 2,000 square foot house next to a bunch of townhouses. So I'm just really concerned about the unintended consequences here, because you're forcing the market to do something that I think the market's already going that way. So encouraging it rather than mandating it, I think could go a long way.
John, Councilor Stapleton.
Actually, could I hear from Mark first? Is that okay?
Sure, Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. Can I be allowed to share screen? If I just pick. Zach, will you give me permission to share screen?
The permissions are already set up, so you should be able to, as long as
there
you have to. There you go.
Right. Let me. Now I got to remember how to do that. But, I'm gonna have to get some technical help here, probably. Okay, there we go. All right, I'm gonna show you. So that 88 lot subdivision that John's talked about, that Eunice showed, this is the grading plan for that site. I have 150 feet of elevation change on this project between where I start down here for Lone Oak to get to the high spot up here. I have to figure out how to get a roadway to get up on there. I have to be able to make the intersections flat. I have to be able to grade this and create buildable paths. So if you try to put 31 more units in here, not just lots, let's just think about units. I don't know how you could do that, because we're ending up with, most of these lots are going to end up with building paths that are less than 50 feet in width in order to put houses on. We've increased the density in smaller lots up on the upper part where it's flatter. And this is what a lot of our land is that we have out there. Now, I would agree that we have some places where we don't. This is the North Star subdivision that we're doing out there off of Kale Road. It's flat. This is what you see in this screenshot here is about 60 acres. And within that 60 acres, there is going to be a little over 300 homes in there. This is 5 units per acre density right here. So let's be sure that you can see what 5 units per acre looks like on a large subdivision. And these lots average in widths about 54, 55 feet in width, and they average in depths 90 feet. So you want to increase this to 6. You got to get 60 more units in here someplace.
Mark, I have a quick question for you while you're on that slide. Is any of that multifamily?
This is just a single family portion. I'm just telling you the density for this 60 acre screenshot. I can tell you what this is what the overall subdivision looks like. There's 650 single family lots in here and 14 acres of multifamily planned in here. In just the single family portion of this, which is about 135 acres. We have a waterway in here and a little bit of wetlands. So those are the kinds of things that you have to deal with, and a BPA easement in here. I'm only at 4.88 units per acre on the single family part of this. And if you add the multifamily into this, we push it up to about 5.4. So it's not going to be that easy. We figured we could, when Mike and we were talking to you last night, we figured we could make 5.5 work, but you start creeping up over 5.5, and it's going to be difficult to do. And if you're banking on a lot of middle housing to take that spot, then there's a lot of opportunities where, like John said, where that's going to happen. But you look at the topography that we got and stuff that on a lot of these lots, I think you're gonna have a really hard time getting that density. Because if you take that street that I did have, and you start trying to figure out, okay, so let's just say I'm going to put middle housing in here. I'm going to split these lots, some of these lots in half. I got 2 driveways instead of 1. I got to get to fit on a street that's got 15 and 12% grades on it. So now I got to figure out how to do that, how to step that in. It's not a flat pad. I can build a sort of flat pad, but I still got to get the driveways to come off of that. It's not that simple to do. I mean, I've been doing this for 47 years, and I've built a lot of different types of subdivisions, including a lot of townhouse and multifamily stuff. But with all the things that we have to incorporate into these projects today, the accessibility, the limits that the fire department wants to put us on street grades now, we don't get to have a lot of 15% runs. And you add in the complications of trees. I was fortunate that this site, most of the trees were taken off this site years ago. But if you had to start saving trees and you start looking at, well, how can you grade around when you have those kind of trees to try to overcome, it gets really hard. And so I just think I wanted to give you some real examples to see. And I was amazed when I looked at the North Star one from the air. I mean, and say, what's it look like to have that kind of density around here and that kind of volume in one place? And this is the kind of things we used to see on TV from California. You know, this is not Oregon. This is not Salem. You don't see very much of this, at least in Salem. We don't see very much of this. We are doing that subdivision on the Pick Sweet site. That one's going to have that one is going to achieve higher densities. We're going to have 5.8, maybe a little bit more in density on that site. But we're putting in an awful lot of lots that are 35 foot wide. You know, we did it as a PUD, and the same builder that's building in here is going to go build a narrower product on that, and that's achievable, but it's flat, and the project worked out pretty well for that. And we had a builder who was interested in doing that kind of product. I'd be scared to death to go out and build and develop a subdivision that I was going to put on the market and create a whole bunch of 35, 45 foot wide lots and hope that someone's going to come along and build on those. So anyway, I'd be happy to answer questions. I just want to be sure that everybody sees what we have here. As time has gone on, we've learned to adapt to all the different kinds of things that have come into play, tree ordinances and grading ordinances and all this stuff has come. But at some point, you're going to come to a pinnacle where you won't be able to do it.
Thanks, Mark. Could you address the two questions I asked of Mr. Erdman, how it would impact developments of less than 5 acres, and also what if we switched it to a net density rather than a gross?
So Mike's right. When you start getting smaller parcels that we have in town here, and you start seeing those, usually they're going to be sites that have other constraints to them. So they're going to be irregular shaped, or they're going to have waterways in them. They're going to have features. They're going to be things that are going to make achieving a gross density harder. If you want to move to a net density so that we all have something to calculate and we know what we're going to take out when we're getting there, then I'm certain, just like Mike said, I'm certain that we're willing to see what that could be. If you took the North Star subdivision that I have put up there, and you assume that with what I have here that at least 25% of this would fall out as right-of-ways and other features, then I'd have a density instead of 5. I'd have a density that's a little over 6. But if you start trying to say, well, if you do that, then we're gonna go what Phil's talking about in 7 and 8. It ain't gonna happen. I mean, it's gonna be really hard to do. So I think that there's ways to do it, so long as we all agree what will come out, so we know what we're taking away. Because we do have a lot of natural feature things to overcome in the community. Now we're working on a project with planning staff out in West Salem, and it's steep. It's got a waterway. It's got lots of trees. It's off of Dokes Ferry. So if I had to try to achieve a minimum density in there of even 5, and it's about a 7 acre site, and I got a whole bunch of it that's just going to be repairing corridors. It's going to be okay. It'll be hard, So I think we just have to be careful that we don't put ourselves in a position where we're creating product that in the end nobody's going to want. I think that a lot of good ideas come to be, and even like we had the Sustainable Fairview project, that was a really good idea, but you didn't see a big run to that first set of product that they make. They got buildings in there, but there's still empty lots in there. And so that it's just not what everybody thought it would be. So new ideas and new approaches aren't always going to be sellable in this community. When I first started doing subdivision work in Salem, I learned right away that Salem is really a neo-traditional type market. It isn't metro. It isn't Seattle. It's people want what they want in this town, and they're not. We tried townhouses. We tried single family attached projects, and we had a really tough time with our clients getting those to move. So we just have to be careful, I think.
Thanks, Mark. We're getting low on time. I do want to just clarify that to meet the density, you don't have to add more lots, right? You could add more units for example, just building a house with an ADU, that would be a way to meet the unit. I do want to clarify, maybe I disagree on the driveway comment Mark made, because most new houses have 2-car garage and the driveway that goes with that. And a duplex would need a 1-car garage, 2 driveways next to each other. It would be the same, basically the same driveway, right? The width of.
It'd be split apart, but.
Well, they're usually right next to each other.
Not typical, no.
I'm not sure.
They would be
I agree
split
with that.
apart, so there's separate entries. So, but.
Right.
Or they'd be on a corner. They'd be on a corner, and it's just as hard. So, but anyway, I'll get out of it. You're not talking.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. So I just want to clarify, though, we're not talking. So potentially that 89, 88 lot subdivision could stay at the exact same lot configuration that they have by building houses with ADUs would be a way to meet that density. So, okay, I think Commissioner Pollack and then Commissioner Schweikart.
Yeah. Real quick, we have a hard stop at 5 because someone else is using the Zoom account. So we have 2 more after this.
Okay, real quick. When we first started, when Eunice or the committee first presented our Salem, they actually took a look at the different areas that actually had building because of the urban growth boundary. And it was mostly building in West Salem and South Salem, and both had the hilly. In other words, all the flat properties got bought up and built right out. So I agree with Mr. Grintz that the properties we have now are going to have some real big challenges. And so I kind of like the idea of the net as opposed to gross, because that will accommodate for the fact that and I've said this time and time again on the Planning Commission, is property is unique. And when you get into West Salem and South Salem and the hilly property, it's going to be more costly to prepare it for a lot of housing. And that housing is going to, that cost of obviously is going on to the purchaser of the homes. And I'm going to tell you that when I was in California and we were looking at new homes, I just hate the fact that you go into the master bathroom, open the window, and you could actually say hi to the guy next door because the house next door is so close. You could say hello to each other in your master bathrooms. So, I mean, I wouldn't like to see that kind of density so close as to, it doesn't make, I don't think it makes for great neighbors, and I don't think it makes for I like the density. I just don't like us going overboard. So I agree that I think it'd be a good idea to take a look at the net as opposed to gross, because of the topography of our areas of buildable land that's left. And the other thing is, I would worry about going to anything above 5.5. That's it.
I'll just quickly say that I think that I agree with what Lisa said in terms of the fact that we're not necessarily talking about adding more lots, but getting more units on the lots. So I think that's why there aren't lot maximums that are being recommended here, but rather just being able to utilize the land that you do have by maximizing your utilization with more units. Because I do understand the comments that were made by the developers who spoke, in that you do have to think about, even though you may have a 10,000 square foot lot, if you're having to deal with topography issues or other sorts of land constraints, then your actual building pad can only be much less than that. But if you're adding multiple units vertically, then you maybe are able to still utilize that same buildable area within that parcel. And I would also just want to say that, bringing it back to what Eunice always starts every presentation of this subcommittee with, which is that we're looking at ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I want to keep that in mind, because I think that we're, while I would really love it if the unfettered free market would provide more solutions to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, I don't believe that that's the case, and hasn't been the case historically in the history of this country. So let's just keep that in mind.
Eunice, could I, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I agree with you. I actually had some trouble when just trying to reconcile this idea that we were having issues sitting on a bunch of vacant housing that was for sale, that wasn't moving. And, you know, from looking at the market that I've seen right now, there's not a lot of inventory out there, and everybody is getting buying homes. And I think that as leaders here on this call, what we're trying to do is guide a steady future that takes into account the greenhouse gas emissions and reducing that. And although traditionally we may be the white picket fence with a single family home and our mindset as far as home ownership, but I think that that needs to start changing and adjusting pretty fast. And so if we can try and get everybody there quicker is better. And so I do like the idea of the net to idea instead of versus the gross, so that we can really take all of those challenges into consideration. But I am not really fully on board with the idea that the market is going to move this in the direction it needs to move in the time frame that it needs to move. So thanks.
So what I'm hearing is perhaps net is a better way to go, that folks maybe don't want to go above 5.5. Whatever that translates to in the net, it would be a higher number, like Mark and Raymond was saying. So if that's, I don't have a question on that, but if that's kind of the general thing, we can always work again with the builders and others and circle back to you all in some fashion on what that number potentially could be. Councilor Phillips.
I mean, I guess that's actually, you know, my question is, given the inventory of land that we have left, and if the builders are currently okay with 5.5, knowing that so much of it is going to have a net that is different than, you know, the actual acreage that's identified, are we actually making it even easier than we intend? I mean, we might move to like 6 or 7, but then the net is actually less than this 5.5, which they're accepting. So that's, I don't want to do less than this 5.5, regardless of topology. I want to make sure that this is the minimum, and then, you know, where we can, we push it a little bit. I don't want to, you know, do 8, but I do want to push on this a bit.
Eunice, as much as I know you're not going to like me for saying this, I almost feel like we might need to schedule one more meeting. Given all that's left on the agenda, the number of topics and the 15 minutes left, and I know, but I think that we don't want to rush anything. We don't want to limit conversation, consideration. This is way too important to rush through. So I'm going to just suggest that we just plan on that.
Okay, we can do that. So do you want us to come back with a net option? Is that what I'm hearing?
I would be interested to know what that looks like. I don't know enough about it yet to have an opinion either way, but I think that it's been raised as an issue. It seems like the builders also have raised it without saying it directly with all of the challenging properties that we have left, that I think it would be an interesting thing to be able to consider. Not convinced it's the right way to go, but I think it's good to consider it since it's been raised here.
Councilor Stapleton, and then Commissioner Griggs.
Yeah, and I'm also interested in looking at that tiered effect that you were talking about at the beginning of this with some of the smaller lots, and seeing if we do a smaller, you know, working that minimums up as far as the higher the acreage gets.
Hey, Commissioner Griggs.
Yeah, I'd like to see what that net buildable unit per acre would be. And I'm sure you're going to consult with the builders to do that. And just, you know, so have a either or. I don't know how you would depict it in a vote, but I think it's worth listening to. And I think on the smaller lots, Councilor Stapleton, I think if we're going to do a buildable, net buildable for the large, I think we need to do the net buildable for the small. I just think that makes sense if you're factoring in the terrain for both large developments plus smaller developments. I think you have to have a commonality in how you're assessing that. But And I'm fine with another meeting. I love Zoom meetings. They're just great. You know, it's my jam.
I have a follow-up question that's a little different. Is there any impact of the House Bill 2001, like on minimums as pertains to this question?
No, if any, no. Okay.
Are there any pre-existing state minimums as it pertains to this question? Okay.
Mike's got his hand raised, Eunice.
Hi, Mike.
Hi. I might just suggest that perhaps one thing you might look at, given the discussion of topography, as you look at tiering, maybe we could talk about perhaps a higher density requirement for flatter sites, because those are the sites that would probably have greater success at actually achieving those greater densities. And so maybe we could look at, perhaps instead of looking at the size of the development, maybe we could look at the topography itself and perhaps go with a tiered system based on what kind of slope that we're looking at.
Mike, we'll be in touch. Okay, so I don't know if we have time for the next two. I'm going to skip over the voting on this one. The last two are, and you can let me know if you just want to move on, leave these for the next meeting. The next two ideas are requiring neighborhood hubs, the option or the opportunity. In large subdivisions, we had landed at 10 units or at a 10-acre site. This was, again, an allowance, not a requirement. You could still be single-family homes. And again, restricting it when it comes to the type of street, the number of lots, etc. We can talk about that or we can hold. And then the last option is the idea of a minimum density that we landed on 15 units per acre in the single family along the core network. So that was the last idea where we had all kind of landed. And the question really was, should we have some exemptions and what should those exemptions be? So given that we have 10 minutes, do you want to take one of those? Yes? Oh, no?
Yeah, can we take the neighborhood hubs? I like your facial.
Look like it. Okay, I mean, it's related to subdivision. So we had initially proposed requiring neighborhood hubs. And again, it's requiring the opportunity for a hub. And I think we had pitched like 20 acre size and you all said, why not 10? It's just an option, it's not a requirement. And so you can still be single family. And then the restrictions we talked about were the same restrictions we're proposing for the neighborhood hub zone elsewhere. It's on a collector or minor arterial. Commissioner Griggs had asked, is there a minimum size? And we were thinking at least 2 lots. We're not going big, we're just saying at least 2 lots. And so I guess we didn't really have any other options on that one. So it's kind of do we still feel this way, requiring the hub option on 10 acres or more with restrictions? Also, you want to jump to the question?
And just to clarify,
And far away.
We're only talking about new subdivisions. We're not talking, this has
Yeah.
nothing to do with all of the other work you're doing on hubs.
No. We have a lot of other work on the hubs, but no.
And then for Councilor Phillips, since you weren't at the last one because of your silly work schedule, there were some exemptions, like they couldn't have an allowed use for a neighborhood hub in a subdivision when there's already another retail type facility close to that. So there were some of those really very common sense exemptions that were included in that. I've got more phone calls on this than anything.
In support?
Okay,
never mind.
I think it's a misunderstanding. I think a lot of people see require neighborhood hubs and subdivisions, and they think it's going to be their existing subdivision, and they think it's going to have to go in regardless of whether, I mean, it's just been not clearly received, the information.
I will do a better job messaging that.
No, it's not.
Verify that language thing there. It's required to have the option. Is that, yeah, I don't know how to phrase that better.
I think the word is allow.
Well, we would be requiring them to tell us which lots are going to be the lots that could be neighborhood hubs. So it's not like in a new subdivision, any of the lots could be neighborhood hubs. It's like when you do a subdivision, where's your hub location? Point those out on the map, we make sure it meets the criteria for placing a hub, and then there's like a deed restriction or something that indicates to a future owner that this could be a hub versus all the rest of the lots in the subdivision.
How about allow identified neighborhood hubs or something?
Yeah, yes.
Designated.
We'll work on the messaging, yeah, for sure.
Well, I think it might help just to add the word new, like even to this sentence right here, right?
New
Then everybody
subdivisions.
can take a deep breath.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Good.
So
For
in our
anybody
last-
watching that's not part of this and is concerned about existing hub locations that the city's identified in our Salem, we are removing some of those locations, and a new map of potential neighborhood hubs will be released in about a month. So stay tuned if you are concerned about a hub potentially next to you. So throw that.
Want to vote real quick? Okay.
So really the question is, last time we said 20 acres and everybody said maybe it should be 10 acres. So we just, or let smaller subdivisions. So we came back with 10. Unanimous-ish. Oh, one no.
I figured I'd throw a no in there because I keep looking at require, and something that, you know, we've talked about how requiring versus incentivizing in some aspects. And I look at that we've talked about, sorry, and then I look at some of the issues that I've dealt with professionally in the code being rigid in requiring and missing something. And you know, at the time I was more frustrated with the city directly for having something like this in its code. And then it was even acknowledged that that was supposed to have been taken out at one time, and it was really old and had been missed. And so it was still there, and it was this hurdle that had to be overcome. And it ended up costing the private property owner lots of money to go through, when by the end, everybody acknowledged that that shouldn't have been there, or it was a requirement that actually didn't make sense and couldn't make sense in all applications. But at the time it was written, nobody was really considering every possible variation. And so, similar to what we've been talking about with the irregularity of infill residential development and trying to meet a certain density standard, I just think, you know, maybe if we incentivized a neighborhood hub by offsetting permit fees on, let's say, those lots, something to that effect. I wonder if that's a better approach to some of this, so that we don't create unforeseen conflicts into the future for developers then being stuck and having, I don't know, non-saleable lots or devalued lots. So I mean, the vote passes, but I figured I'd throw mine out there and for thought and conversation.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Levin. I think that's all the time we have, right, Eunice?
I think the next meeting, maybe we'll shoot for meeting in August, maybe just an hour, and we'll tackle really the minimum density in large or any subdivision, and then the minimum density along the core network, which we've talked about before. If that sounds okay. Commissioner Slikart.
Yeah, I just want to, I know that Shane already referenced it, but I just want to say this is actually going to be my last meeting with you all. I am moving out of the state. My husband took a job at Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio. So we are Yeah, we are moving. It's kind of it was an unexpected change for us, and so I'm really sad to be leaving the Planning Commission and this group too, because I think there's a lot of good work happening here, and I enjoy these conversations and thoughts about kind of the future of the city. Yeah, so I just want to say this will be my last time, so I don't know if there will be another planning commissioner for your meeting in August to replace me, but I really appreciate being on the subcommittee, and thank you guys so much.
You will be missed, Commissioner Schweikart, and in both avenues. And did you hear that, Councillor Hoy? We need a replacement.
I did hear that, and I just want to thank you, Commissioner Schweikart, for your service. I've really appreciated your insight. And I would also add that I believe our next meeting will be remote, and I do believe there is an internet connection between here and there. So I'm not sure that you're automatically out of it. Just saying.
Well, if I'm not on the Planning Commission anymore, I mean, I'm still gonna be on the Planning Commission meeting on the 20th, but I think that's my last one.
Thank you, Commissioner Schweikart.
Maybe hard if it's the East Coast time zone for these meetings.
Be very tired. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. Sorry we didn't get through everything in time, but we will be scheduling one more meeting. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.